one of the things I keep seeing on Twitter are these posts about China, and it's showing some of the beautiful cities that China has built over the last, 20 or 30 years. And it's Shenzhen or it's Chongqing or even Beijing, and it's showing like the financial districts and all the skyscrapers and the beautiful lights. And the captions are usually the same, saying something like, this is what a country can look like if they spend their money on their people or on their infrastructure. And it got me thinking, because I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what a country can look like if you invest in your infrastructure and in your buildings and in your people. And that's exactly what China's been doing since the 80s, and even farther back than that. But you could say that in the 80s is when there was a real, policy shift, and China started to really invest in its country and open up to the world in order to make money. And then the money that they made through trade was reinvested in the country, which allowed the country to grow and prosper. And the point that these posts are trying to make is kind of like looking at the United States and saying, look, if you live in the United States and your country is spending $800 billion on military spending and even more on foreign aid, that money is leaving your economy. And if you value kind of the defense contractors, I guess, and you allow your politicians to spend money on things like military equipment and on the military, then you're going to end up with a very large military, a very powerful military, but a very poor country. And we're seeing that. The United States is the largest spender when it comes to military budget. They spend the most on the military every year. Again, it's over $800 billion. And when you have a large military, you're going to use that military. And there'll be a lot of people in the comments saying, well, the United States maintains law and order in the world. And there is some truth to that. They are responsible for maritime safety in many parts of the world. But the other aspect, or the other argument that you could say is, well, if the United States focused on its own country and spent a reasonable amount on the military and on aid, they could work with other countries and everybody could guard and patrol and help with this responsibility of safety and security and a global peace agreement that we have, where we all say certain parts of the world will be managed by certain larger countries. So you could say NATO is responsible for Europe. The United States is responsible for parts of the Pacific and Atlantic. You could say countries like Brazil are responsible for parts of the Atlantic, and you could say India is responsible for, parts of Asia, the Indian Ocean, and things like that. China is responsible for the China Sea and parts of the Pacific. And you could have agreements that say that everybody is responsible for different parts, and you work together to maintain law and order in those regions. Again, a multipolar world, which China has been pushing for a long time. And Russia has been kind of on board with this idea that, yes, there should be spheres of influence, and the United States shouldn't try and control the entire globe. And there's lots of people in the United States who are also calling for this and saying, look, our infrastructure is falling apart. They did an assessment a few years back and basically gave the United States infrastructure a failing grade, meaning it had like a D rating of possible scales. And the United States has a grading system, and an A is considered really good, and an F is considered failing or, very bad. And it got like a D or an F on this assessment that they did. And this was when Biden came into office. He said we were going to have this infrastructure bill and we were going to spend billions of dollars on rebuilding our infrastructure, which is actually a really good thing, and I agree with, because infrastructure projects actually stimulate the economy. A lot of people will point to China and say, oh, China is overbuilt. They build airports and railroads and all this stuff that they don't need and they'll never be used. But that is spending. When China builds a new railroad, they have to stimulate the economy in that area. They have to hire workers, they have to hire engineers, they have to hire basically everybody involved in building a large-scale building, and then they have to purchase the supplies. So supplies have to be bought, food has to be bought to feed the people who are working there, and it stimulates the economy. So therefore there are jobs. They might be temporary in the sense of construction jobs always end, but they do create economic activity. We even saw this during the Great Depression. One of the reasons the United States was able to slowly come out of the Great Depression in the 1930s was because they went on a very large infrastructure bill. Basically, infrastructure projects were being built all over the country in order to employ people because there was no jobs and the economy was very slow. It was in a depression, so they said the government stepped in and started to build things like the Hoover Dam. My grandfather, I believe, actually worked on one of the projects for the Hoover Dam, and that was providing jobs in stimulating the economy. And towards the end of the 1930s, the United States economy was recovering. Of course, what happened was World War II started, and because the United States needed to sell weapons, didn't need to, but wanted to sell weapons, it supersized the economy. All of a sudden, they realized that jobs in the defense industry, making weapons, guns, bullets, tanks, planes, was very profitable. And it put the United States on this path, which is currently still on, which is basically relying on the military to stimulate the economy. So every bullet that is fired, every plane that is built, every tank that is manufactured has to come from somewhere, and those are oftentimes US manufacturers. Because of the sensitivity of the technology, you can't outsource that to other parts of the world. You can outsource parts of it, but the assembly in the actual finished product comes from the United States. It's US military equipment. It's the military industrial complex that everybody talks about. And it does provide a lot of jobs for the United States, and the budget that could be going into modern railroads in the United States ends up going into modern weaponry, right? Lockheed Martin and Boeing and all these other, North Grumman and all these other groups get these contracts from the United States in order to build military equipment, instead of going into the public sector where it could be used to build better airports. I went through the airport in New York or whatever it is, and last time I was going in the United States, and it was completely run down. I was flying out of Beijing Daxing Airport. Beautiful, 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 brand new airport. The capacity is, like 100 million passengers a year, and it's beautiful. And then I land in the United States and I'm seeing the ceiling is falling down and everything looks worn out and all of the shops look run down and everything just feels old, because it is, because they haven't invested in maintenance and upkeep in the way that they could, and they haven't built a new airport in a long time in that area. So I guess the point of this video is why does one country that has a very large GDP spend around 4.5% of its budget on infrastructure, while the other country, the United States, spends around 0.5% of its budget on infrastructure? For me, I don't understand it, because the United States could invest in its people, it could invest in its infrastructure, it could have better schools, it could have better libraries, it could have state-of-the-art, public infrastructure that people would use, because it is better. I mean, the high-speed trains in China they're amazing. It's one of the things that I love about China, was I could get on a high-speed train and zip anywhere in the country in just a few hours. And I know that I enjoyed that in China, so I know the people in the United States would also enjoy that. People drive in the United States because they have to. And a lot of people will say, I love driving, it's great. But there's just as many people who say, I hate driving. It's a nightmare. You're stuck in traffic. You got to pay for insurance. You got to pay for gas. You got to pay for all of this. And then your time is lost because you have to focus on the road. Where on the high-speed train, you could read a book. You could take a nap. You could watch a movie. You could do anything you want because you're not driving and you're not paying attention to the road. You can literally just have conversations with your, whoever you're traveling with, your travel companion. And all that time can be reinvested into whatever it is that whatever your hobby is that you can do sitting down, whether it's watching movies or reading books or studying, or you can even have your laptop out and actually do work, because on the high-speed trains they have high-speed internet. And so all that time that Americans are wasting driving in their car, and at most you can listen to the radio. That's about all you can do. Maybe you can listen to an audiobook, but when you're focused on the road, you have to focus on the road. You're driving. So most people end up just wasting that time listening to music. And hours are wasted every year, literally every month, when people could reinvest that into improving their skills or doing more work, making them more productive. So I think it's really a shame that the United States doesn't invest more of its budget into the things that would actually improve the United States. They could improve homelessness. That's a simple thing that they could improve. They could improve the highways and the bridges. They could improve the railroad system. They could improve the airports. They could improve the ports. There's so many things that the United States could invest in and create jobs in those, in those investments, and stimulate the economy. But instead, they choose to send military aid to Ukraine, or military aid to Israel, or aid to other countries with the hope that it will maybe reduce, I don't know, sometimes it's about pirates. If they send aid to Somalia, then maybe less people become pirates. Sometimes it's about influence. They just want to influence the politics of a country, so they send aid to a country in hopes of influencing the politics there. But in reality, I feel like the United States should take a look at what China's doing and learn from China in this case, because the United States could have the most amazing infrastructure if they just were willing to invest in it. And I think the people in power need to understand that when you invest in your people, you have a sense of pride, you have a sense of community, you have a sense of well-being, you feel cared for. And I think in the United States, many people right now, especially going into this election, feel like the country is not on the right track and people are not being taken care of. And there's a distrust of media and politicians that I don't know how you fix that until you start reinvesting in the people and focusing on the people at home and saying, we do care about the American people and we do want the American people to improve. Much like what China's been doing for the last 30, 40 years. They've been investing in China and on the Chinese people, and that's why the Chinese people have a lot of pride in their country now and say, we're doing good things. Whereas in the United States, it feels like everybody is disillusioned and thinks that the United States is failing. So I think that the United States should actually look to China and say, hey, what are they doing right? And how can we actually do that to improve our own nation? What do you guys think? Do you think that countries should spend a lot of money on their military or a lot of money on their people and infrastructure to create a better country? Leave a comment below and I will see you in the next video.